Good morning, everybody. I feel very fortunate and privileged to be here at this very important conference. The topic of my presentation is the influence of hot climate on football results in the Gulf region, a statistical analysis of international matches. The key investigator, Frank Bouchery, was not able to attend this meeting. Therefore, I am going to present this on his behalf. Football is the most popular sport in the world. And because of this worldwide popularity, one can expect that football competitions could be played in every possible environmental condition. For example, from low altitudes in Croatia to high altitudes in Bolivia, or from temperatures as cold as -5 in Moscow to high temperatures in Kuwait. No matter how extreme the weather is, humid, windy, snow, or rain, it is not going to stop the spectators from attending these events. And more importantly, it is not going to stop the players from scoring goals. However, my presentation will be limited to effect of hot environmental conditions in football. In a review article, Mon made this important statement. All players will be affected by the environmental conditions, but players who are accustomed to living, training, and competing in temperate climates are placed at a particular disadvantage when a game must be played in hot or humid regions against a local team acclimatized to those conditions. But results that are able to quantify these effects in a football game are very limited. There was one study which included 11 non-acclimatized subjects which played 2 matches in high heat and moderate heat condition. And what they found was, during the high heat condition, these players covered significantly less distance. And moreover, most of the time during the high heat condition was spent in walking, and less time in jogging, and less time in running. Another study, which George already mentioned, which included a bigger sample, and it was conducted in Doha, Qatar. So they also had 2 experimental matches which found similar results. Number 1, the total distance covered was reduced, and also the duration of high intensity running was much greatly reduced. On the other hand, pass accuracy and cross accuracy improved by 8% and 9%. So despite these findings, team managers and coaches are more concerned about the outcome of the matches rather than the performance measures. All they want to know is, if we play games in the heat, can we win such games? Can we score more goals in such an environment? Or can we maintain a clean sheet or concede fewer goals? So the aim of our study was to determine the effects of heat and humidity on matches that are played in hot conditions. To answer this objective, we specifically selected 6 different countries from the GCC region and analyzed all the football matches played. We selected this region because, number 1, football is the national sport for this region, and number 2, the players are accustomed to living, training, and competing in hot conditions. The typical distribution of temperature, the average minimum and average high during the 12-month period, as you can see in this graph. We used the FIFA official website to extract data on the matches outcomes, and we used the wonderground.com website to extract historical data on temperature and humidity at the time of those matches. Therefore, for every match played by a GCC country, we extracted venue temperature and humidity, the usual monthly temperature and humidity of each team, the FIFA official ranking of each team at the time of those matches, the match outcomes, and also we computed measures of environmental heat stress, namely the heat index and WBGT. And this is, before we go ahead, it's very important to understand this very important predictors we used in the model. The temperature difference, delta T. It is defined as the difference between the venue temperature and the usual temperature of the GCC opponent. That means if delta T is greater than 0, the GCC opponent is playing at a higher temperature than usual. So in a similar way, we also computed delta H, humidity difference, heat index difference, and the wet bulb globe temperature difference. So we were able to extract around 2008 matches during a period of 55 years from 1957 to 2012. And we selected only the FIFA recognized international matches that was played by GCC against other GCC countries or a non-GCC country. So for the Gulf countries, as you can see, the average usual monthly temperature was significantly higher compared to the non-Gulf countries. And modeling for the favorable outcome. We were interested to know the favorable outcome, to model this to a win or a draw compared to a loss. So for a GCC team, we used delta T as a predictor, and we found a significant association. So delta T was significantly associated with favorable outcome. That means the odds ratio of 1.04 means that for every 1 unit increase in delta T, that is the GCC opponent playing at a 1 degree higher temperature than usual, it will place the GCC team at an advantage by 4%. So, and however, delta H, on the other hand, was not a significant predictor. And it was also important to account for important predictors, confounders, namely the difference in the team ranking and also the home advantage. And as you can see, of course, the ranking difference between the two teams had an effect. For every time you're playing with a higher ranked team by one level, the odds of winning decreased by 1%. And at home, the odds of winning increased by 1.5% when we used delta T in the model. Then we also added interaction term of delta T with GCC or a non-GCC opponent. And here is where we found interesting findings. We found that when GCC teams play against non-GCC teams, they have a greater odds of success when matches are played at hotter environment. Whereas GCC teams playing against other GCC teams who are also accustomed to hot conditions have no other advantage over favorable outcome. And compared to delta T and delta H, we found delta T as a more important predictor for match outcome than delta H. So to illustrate this table clearly, I would like to share the results in the form of a graph. This makes it more clear. As you can see, we have on the x-axis adjusted goal difference, adjusted for home advantage and adjusted for difference in ranking. We found that the GCC teams, when they play against non-GCC teams, they will win with a greater goal margin if the matches are played in hotter conditions. However, against non-GCC teams, this association is not present. Then it's also important to understand the ranking of the team. Therefore, this graph illustrates when GCC teams are playing with opponents which are lower in ranking, they will win by a greater goal margin when they play in hot conditions. However, when they are playing against the top ranked teams who are 50 ranks above them, they may not have this advantage of winning, but at least they will not concede many goals when they're playing in hot conditions. We were also interested to determine how heat stress could predict match outcomes. Therefore, we used change in heat index, delta HI and delta WBGT as a predictor. And we found that among the two models, delta WBGT was a better predictor. It was giving more better fit and better R-square value compared to delta HI. And overall, delta WBGT was a better predictor than delta T as well. So in conclusion, GCC countries, when playing at high temperature, have advantage against the non-GCC teams. However, against tougher opposition with better international ranking, this advantage is reduced, but is not completely eliminated. Delta WBGT offers better prediction, whereas delta T could be used for convenience. And this study also highlights the importance of acclimatization. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Aziz. We'll take some questions from the audience, if anybody has any questions. Okay. was very technical and statistics-oriented presentation. It was very interesting. I have a quick question, actually. How did you account for the difference in ranking? So what did you use in your...
Sorry. We extracted the FIFA official ranking for each team. So for a GCC team and the opponent team, so when we calculate the difference between the two ranks, this is how we got delta ranking, difference in ranking. So if delta ranking is greater than 0, it means you're playing with a tougher opponent. And this is why you can see the association here in this table that when you play against tougher opponents, the odds ratio of winning is reduced. It's less than 1, and it is significant.
If there are any questions, Seb has a question.
Yeah, thanks. Very interesting study. I just have a question. So if I understood, it was a question of comprehensive. If I understood it right, the humidity had no effect. Is that correct?
Yes, by itself, it has no effect. By itself.
Because I remember another study where we looked at the injury rate, and the temperature, interestingly, had not a great effect, but the humidity actually had on injuries.
Might be on injuries, but I have no clue about this because I'm only a statistician.
Thanks.
Very good answer.
Is there any additional question from the floor? Yeah, in the back.
Thanks a lot. I want to know if we take in consideration the time for preparation between the arrival, team guest, and the day play game is taken in consideration or not, because there is two way of schools. One schools want to play the game as soon as possible from the arrival, and the other school want to take time to make some preparation before.
Yes, that's a very important thing, because coming to a new place and staying, the longer the stay, it's more expensive it gets, and also the team wants to get acclimatized. But in our study, we were not able to get this information because we went back from 1956 to 2012, and we could only extract the match played. So really, in the future studies, this should be taken into consideration, but unfortunately, we did not have any source to extract this data, although we also consider this as a limitation for us.
If I can comment on your question, I think you might have some answer on that tomorrow, as we have a session about heat acclimatization in which we will talk about how many days the player will need to acclimatize to a new environment. So that will not be a statistical answer, but at least that will be a bit more physiological glue of what is going on for that. One last question, Professor Soka?
It's interesting that idea of arriving quickly and performing to avoid environmental effects carries over to the heat. Because originally that idea came from high altitude, but the idea with high altitude was to avoid high altitude sickness, which takes a number of hours to develop. But if you arrive at high altitude and you basically compete and you don't acclimatize, you're at the nadir of your performance, which is pretty well documented.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you for the answer.
Yeah.